Hello again, Struck. Here I am with another ready for launch build video for Diablo 4, and this one is the Bladestorm 2.0 Barbarian build. The Bladestorm build is returning, and if you like winning and if you like spinning while doing so, this is the build for you. We've got plenty of momentum going on with this build, we've got plenty of Fury generation to keep us going, and we have, of course, the key passive that makes us do more damage with our core skills for the price of increased Fury generation, which is why Fury generation is a big thing for this build. Thankfully, there are quite a few legendary aspects and quite a few unique items that could help with various things in that setup. Needless to say, Whirlwind is the core skill that we're building around. Whirlwind is what we're centering this build. This is how spin to win builds would be and should be. Um, there are quite a lot of improvements thanks to me playing in the three beta weekends that we got. I do have some plenty of actually not some plenty of information regarding various things, and here is the evolution of that spin to win build. There are some changes, obviously, and again, it's a full ready for launch setup with paragons, with skills, with sockets and gem suggestions, with suggestions for unique items you can include on top of legendary aspects, and then also information about the gear row. So buckle up, I hope you enjoyed this video and let's go. Starting with the skill trees, we are setting up the foundations of the build by picking Frenzy, maxing out Whirlwind, selecting Rallying Cry, going for some leap for mobility and an escape mechanic, as well as massive nice Fury generation, much needed. And then we are taking Steel Grasp to apply vulnerability. I realized that vulnerable is such an incredible thing on boss fights and vulnerable damage because it's difficult to stun enemies, it's difficult to crowd control enemies if they are bosses. It takes a while before that, but you can always apply vulnerable and you can always get that extra damage on a boss. So keeping vulnerable on a boss is nice. And Steel Grasp also pulls enemies closer to us. Unfortunately, it's not a 360 and there is no item that makes it a 360 radius pull. There is only one that makes it pull more, but it's still a conical one. So hopefully Blizzard does something to Steel Grasp. We're also taking Wrath of the Berserker. Now, to show you all the rest of the stuff and to show you the different versions I'm taking, it's best if I do it um, from here. I mean, first let's show you the icons of the skill. This is Frenzy, Whirlwind, Rallying Cry, Leap, um, Steel Grasp, and Wrath of the Berserker together with Unbridled or Unbridled Rage. Now, it's easy if I use my own spreadsheet for this thing because here you can see back to back the two bonuses and it makes it easy to understand why I took the ones I took. So you can see Battle Frenzy while berserking the skills gain 5 attack speed for each stack of Frenzy we have over the damage reduction. I think this is much better for me considering Whirlwind will be benefiting from that 15 percent attack speed. And if we have the item with extra stacks for frenzy, that means this 15% attack speed becomes 25. Again, attack speed, movement speed, important, very important for a spin to win build in most action RPGs, and Diablo 4 is no different in that regard from the looks of it. With Whirlwind, I prefer the Violent one. We're not going for a bleeding build, at least not with this Whirlwind build. Violent one is the one that fits, and it fits very nicely. Then 3 points into a pressure point, needless to say, it's perfect. Again, more chances to make enemies vulnerable, very, very good mechanic. Then this one would be interesting, but I would suggest using dual wielding for frenzy so you would build faster the stacks so you could move to whirlwind faster. Um, and you would still build the fury that it builds faster as well. Um, Instead of getting this extra 15%, which is negligible bonus when you only have 4 plus 2 fury generated. Um, Rallying Cry is good as a single pointer. By the way, the same goes for Frenzy, just a single pointer. Then Enhanced Rallying Cry, and then Tactical again for Fury Generation. It is lovely. If you're having trouble surviving, there is always Strategic Rallying Cry, but with this build, I think going for Tactical Rallying Cry would be the better choice. Then you have stuff like Imposing Presence for extra maximum life. I put 3 points here. If you feel like you don't need the extra 10% life, just go for 1 point. And then 3 points in Martial Vigor must have, in my opinion. And keep in mind, elites is a group of enemies that also covers bosses. Bosses are considered as elites. Elites are not considered as bosses. Let's put it that way. So champions and stuff will still remain elites. But when it specifies bosses, it only means bosses. When it specifies elites, it means elite champions, bosses, everything. That's more than a regular mob. So moving on, one pointer in Elite and the Fury Generation Elite version. Needless to say, I'd much rather take that over the SWO. Um, Booming voice, 3 points for that 30% increased duration for our rallying cry. If you think it's not necessary to take it again, it's optional. But even though we have one shout, I think we can still benefit from this for that extra 30% duration for extra 2 seconds roughly for us and one for our allies. Guttural Yell, only 1 point, and this is kind of, I guess, the last remaining point in the build I had. So you can just put it anywhere you want. I'm even gonna color code it so it's a little obvious that it's optional. Aggressive resistance maxed out, in my opinion, very nice while we're spinning, while we're berserking to have the damage reduction. Then Battle Fervor, 1 point. I think it's more than enough to have it as a 1 second increase. Again, if you remove points from other places, such as Booming Voice or such as this Guttural Yell, you could put more points into Battle Fervor. Prolific Fury, I think it's must have to max out this one. Swiftness, again, optional for movement speed. I think it goes amazingly well with Whirlwind. I personally wouldn't remove it from the build and I would keep it. And that 12% movement speed, it's permanent, it's all the time, and um, spin to win builds definitely benefit from stuff like that. Then there's Steel Grasp. Just a single point is enough, and you could go for this, but I'd rather take the extra one charge. And with one of the aspects, we get one more, and we get a total of 3 charges with Steel Grasp. Even if you don't have 360, you can just do it 3 times quickly to get the enemies from 3 different directions. In a Y shape, and that should be more than enough to work as a 360. Then Pit Fighter, 1 point, just so we can unlock No Mercy, and No Mercy maxed out. We don't need slaying. I mean, it would be nice to have it, but no spare points. And then 2 points into Expose Vulnerability. Those 2 seconds would be pretty nice. If you think that Expose Vulnerability is unnecessary, Flank Strike is a good thing where you could put those points for extra damage to bosses when they're about to die. And when they're at their final 25% or so, they're very annoying, most of the bosses. So it's good to have damage to injured in such cases. Thick Skin, 3 points. Needless to say, it's massive, it's good, it's I love it. And then Wrath of the Berserker maxed out with the 2 upgrades and 3 points into Heavy Handed. We don't need all the other stuff here. Wall Up, Concussion, Brute Force. I mean, this one won't be bad to have Brute Force, but Heavy Handed. And since the focus is mostly on slashing weapons and not bludgeoning, I wouldn't recommend taking those. And that pretty much is it together with Unbridled or Unbridled Rage. Yeah, 100% multiplicative more fury cost, but 135% multiplicative increased damage to Whirlwind. For the unique items, and I do have a confirmation from multiple sources that we can have more than one unique item, which in a way breaks the game in a very terrible way when it comes to balance, and having that one rarity that kind of um, seems in most cases better than legendaries. But I would recommend one item that is great to use, and then I think put it in my spreadsheet, and later on in the aspect segment, I'm talking about three more items that could go very well with the build. But the top choice would be the most obvious one. Gore's devastating grips, which are gloves. Whirlwind explodes after it ends, dealing 50 to 70% of the total base damage dealt to surrounding enemies as fire damage. It gives attack speed, it gives lucky hit chance, and a solid amount of those. It gives fury on kill, which is perfect for mobbing. Not so good on bosses, but for mobbing it will keep the train going. And 2 to 4 ranks of Whirlwind. Now, I will talk more about the other unique items, but I will quickly show and mention them right now. So we have Battle Trance, which is an amulet which gives you ranks to frenzy and some other good stats. There's Harlequin's Crest, Shaco, very nice for farming those Helltides with that material drop rate, and it also gives you ranks to all skills and damage reduction. And then there is the Ancient's Oath, which is a two-handed axe, which could be your main splashing weapon for Whirlwind, which gives you ranks to Steel Grasp, mind you, and gives you some nice vulnerable damage and berserking skill damage. Even if you ignore the bleeding, the damage to bleeding enemies, Steel Grasp does get two additional chains, and it also does slow enemies. And I think it is a very nice additional option on top of the other remaining things. In the helmet, I've put Grasping Whirlwind, then Exploiter in the amulet, Weapon Master's aspect in the chest, Steadfast Berserker's aspect in the pants. In the gloves, this Devious aspect until the unique goes there, and by unique I mean the main one, the Gore's Devastating Grips. Then Relentless Berserker's aspect of Giant Strides is in ring 1. In ring 2, aspect of Berserk Fury. In the first one-handed weapon, rapid aspect. In the second dual-wielded weapon, aspect of the Expectant. And then for the two-handed weapons stuff that I think would benefit greatly from the 100% efficiency, which is in the first two-handed weapon aspect of the Dire Whirlwind. In the second two-handed weapon accelerating aspect. This is what I think would be nice to have. Now, there are ways how to rework how to rearrange the items. If you get that amulet, it's for that amulet I've intentionally put something on the amulet SWAT that I wouldn't mind getting rotated, such as Grasping Whirlwind gets removed from the helmet, and then Exploiter aspect goes there, and now you empty the amulet for the Battle Trance. For the Shaco, the same thing would happen. Well, it's almost the same thing. Again, if you have both of those at the same time, Battle Trance and Harlequin Crest, you would have to sacrifice one more aspect. But let's say you have only one of them. So for the Shaco, again, you remove this one, and then what happens is it just goes there without moving anything else. And for the Ancient's Oath, what you need to do is move accelerating aspect um, onto onto where aspect of Berserk Fury is, which is the ring 2 SWAT. So you're sacrificing this one goes there, and then the axe goes here. This would be the way to do it. Hopefully this is clear now. Let's move on to properly show you each of those aspects, and maybe you can see why I've taken them. Dire Whirlwind, amazing. Crit strike chance is increased by 5 to 10% for each second it is channeled, up to 20 to 40%. And those get boosted by 100% if you use it in a two-handed weapon, meaning this 5% is 10, the 10% is 20, and this 20 is 40, and the 40 is 80. Meaning you would have so much crit chance, you would be pretty much shitting crits while you have Whirlwind. This Devious aspect, again, it's something not as important, and that's why you might want to put it somewhere where it's easy to sacrifice, such as the gloves. But I don't know if it's strong. I haven't experienced it. I haven't gotten it to try it when I did try Barbarian. So This is just something as an obvious synergy, but how good of an obvious synergy that would be remains to be seen. Um, so it's temporary until the unique. And then accelerating aspect, another amazing aspect for a two-handed weapon. Critical strikes with core skills increase your attack speed by 20 to 40% for 3 seconds, which would be 40 to 80%. And since we'll be shooting crits, this and this, there's just a match made in Barbarian Heaven, those two things. Then definitely amazing thing to have as both of those being in the two-handed weapon slots. Of course, accelerating eventually, if you get that tax I suggested, will go into a different slot, into a ring slot, but until then, enjoy it in a two-hander. Basic skills gain attack speed, I think it's a must-have for us to generate Fury faster, to just do our few hits of Frenzy to get those Frenzy stacks faster. Expectant is nice. While you're generating those Frenzy stacks, you're generating also some of this extra damage for Whirlwind. How this damage works, whether it will keep getting the bonus until I stop holding and channeling, or whether it will be just for the first X amount of hits remains to be seen. Weapon Master's aspect is pretty solid. Extra charge for Steel Grasp and chance to stun enemies while we are pulling them, which is pretty nice. But it says damaging an enemy. It doesn't say um, interacting with an enemy, because Steel Grasp doesn't do damage. So would it really stun? Remains to be seen as well, because it's not going to be damaging, it's just going to be pulling enemies. So would it still have chance to proc on pull or only on actual damage done? If it's not actual damage done needed, then they need to reward this to hitting an enemy or something else. Now, exploiter aspect, I love it. It's nice to have the crowd control duration, not as necessary for this build, but the damage to enemies while they're unstoppable is big bonus during boss fights. Relentless Berserker's aspect, it's lovely. Damaging an enemy with a core skill has up to X% chance to extend the duration of berserking by 1 second. Double the duration if it was a critical, and we'll be having a lot of criticals again, as I said. So this will be proccing a lot. And then Whirlwind periodically pulls enemies, something that's I love it. I think I wouldn't wanna I wouldn't wanna necessarily get rid of it. And by the way, aspect of grasping Whirlwind here should be um in yellow. I'll change it in other places as well. But yeah, I wouldn't remove it from the build until really necessary, like getting the Shaco, for example. But it's something I don't know how useful it would be, considering we have chains that will pull enemies. But it's an interesting mechanic. But it has to get sacrificed eventually. Berserk Fury is nice for that Fury generation, and Giant Leaps is nice if you want to leap more often, if you want to reduce the cooldown. Here I've noticed sacrificing Berserk Fury, but if you think it will really hurt your Fury generation, you might as well sacrifice the Giant Strides for the sake of getting the Iron Old Axe in this place to move the accelerating. Then Steadfast Berserker is my choice defensive skill for the pants that can only have defensive, and I think it works perfectly well with this setup. Sockets and gems. Something that shouldn't be much of a problem to figure out, but just in case, I'm including this section. For the weapons, what is great is Emerald for bosses. Critical strike damage to vulnerable enemies again. It's extremely easy to keep vulnerable on enemies compared on bosses compared to crowd control. So damage to crowd control might be amazing for mobbing, but damage to vulnerable great against bosses that have that break bar, and you can't crowd control them all the time. So then basic skill damage is also a good alternative if you can't get anything else. Overpowered damage is also nice, but top choices would be this one for mobbing, this one for boss fights. And this one also works for mobbing as well, by the way. So keep that in mind. Armor, Skull, Sapphire, Ruby. I would go for the maximum life from the Ruby, but the Sapphire with damage reduction while fortified is not a bad choice either, and neither is the Skull, although the Skull would be my third choice for the healing received. Especially for this build when we don't have that much sources of healing in the first place. And jewelry, diamond, unless you need specific resistance. So all resistances um, would be in the choice for most people, but if you need to patch up a certain resistance that's incredibly low, obviously pick the stone correlating to that resistance. When it comes to gear rows, the easiest way to try and understand it is it's best to look for certain key things that work well. Keywords, maybe you could even call them. For example, damage, crit strike chance, crit strike damage, lucky hit chance, ranks, and then elites. Let's first go through the stuff. You're looking for things like physical as the type of damage, priority number one. Fire, because Whirlwind also does some fire damage, priority number two or maybe three. Swashing, I would recommend using a swashing weapon like that unique axe or a decent sword. In fact, we would want a sword, a two-handed sword ideally for the build, but if you do use the axe, sure, use it. But I personally would recommend using a two-handed sword because in the Paragons we're also taking sword bonuses. Um, so damage with swashing, it works well with sword or axe. So I would go physical, then maybe swashing, then maybe fire in terms of priority. Then core skills, basic skills and brawling skills in this priority. Core, basic, brawling. Unless you want to do, you want to get more bonuses to leap rather than frenzy. It's up to you, but core should be the priority. And now those keywords you're looking for crit chance, crit damage with those skills, with those types of damages, damages with those, ranks to those skills, ranks to Whirlwind, priority number one, priority number two, maybe Frenzy, then maybe Leap, Steel Grasp, and Rallying Cry. Then Wookie hit chance with those damages, physical, etc., damage bonuses, and so on, resistances to all elements. Again, crit chance, crit damage with the things I've mentioned as types of damage. Um, in fact, this one is probably the same as that one. I need to remove one of them. Um, but yeah, then there's those two elites. Same things, but two elites. Then damage after killing an elite. Damage reduction after killing an elite. A crit strike with those types of damages against elites. Overpowered damage. And then there comes the crowd controlled, vulnerable, and while fortified bonuses. Definitely nice. Damage while healthy, pretty solid fortify generation, chance when struck to fortify, and then overpower related things. Good. All of those are good. Those are the higher priority stats. Which one of those would be at the highest priority and not? I don't have the time to do that. I'm just giving you the list. Some of those things at the top might be just as good as those at the bottom. It's not in list of priority, but orange is higher priority than this golden one. On my website and on my spreadsheet, they would be in white and in light blue color. I'm extremely disappointed by some of the legendary Paragon board bonuses, notes, such as this one, 8 attack speed for 6 seconds, not worth the amount of points I would spend. I would much rather spend them around the cluster by using things that give me bonuses for each 5 dex, 5 strength, 5 willpower, in that around that socketed cluster. Rather than taking this one, and rather than I would love to have this one, but rather than spending too many points on it, I focused on getting boards that are useful for me in terms of clusters in sockets and getting those ones. In fact, I even took a board like the Bomb Breaker that is definitely not something I care about on this specific build as much, since I'd rather focus my attention towards swashing with Whirlwind and stuff. But still using Burgeoning for overpower and stuff, it's not so bad. And as usual, I have stage 1, which is at level 89 if you have 0 renown or if you have 020 renown points, that means at level 84. And one with level 100 with 20 points from renown for 220 total points. Let's start at the beginning and tell you as I go how to do things. So starting here, strength and so on, I always start with the damage and life, skipping one of the life bonuses. And since we are socketing here ire, which gives you for every 5 strength within range 7.2% increased damage while berserking, and if you have 40 strength at least, while berserking take 10% reduced damage from elites, you want to take a route that's near the strength nodes. So if we take this route here, we are near this node here for later to take it again, and this one to take later. So we're taking this, then clicking here, then you're moving sideways. You're taking this one. Now you have to decide, do you want this extra 7.2 damage while berserking before you reach this place or not? The way I would do it is I would take this, put a point here, put a point there, and then this, and exit. And next is Carnage. We're not using Carnage, but we want to reach the glyph socket in a good way. So the 3 strength here, the dex. And then on the way to that, there is some more strength and dex. Then we're reaching territorial, 9.6% damage to close enemies and 10% damage reduction against close enemies if you get 25 dex at least. At the bottom one, we stopped at 40. We'll be returning, but here we will be getting all the dex before moving on. And to do that, you would need this extra point here was missed, by the way. I'll update it later. So we need to get all the various dex things. And this one is easy to reach, but I'll first do this. And then that one. Eventually, we will return to take the damage while berserking. It's not as important right now. It's 5%. And we take this dex and then we move on sideways, taking those 2 decks before moving on this way, taking the damage while berserking and enraged with berserk duration and stuff. You could skip those 2 if you want, or you could skip this one if you want and just go something like that. But eventually you need to reach this way and connect to Warbringer. And again, Warbringer is an amazing one, but not as amazing as to spend the amount of points needed to reach from this place to that place. So in general, I'll just, as I said, skip that one and just take this where we put rat, which for every 5 decks, green range core skills deal. And this should be 19 point something damage, but I guess it got nerfed to 16.44. This is new updated information. So yeah, this one 16.44 increased strike damage for every 5 decks. We want to get as much decks as possible here as well. If you enter through here and you go sideways and then you go up and slot in rat, the next step would be to go here, get this physical damage, get this physical damage strength, get those 2 dexes. Later we are returning to get the remaining physical damage. For now we can just leave them as they are, unless you really want them early. Then you can do this 1, 2 to get this dex for that extra 16 damage, and then you're moving here strength, dex, strength, dex, and then this dex, and then you're going up. And here I've picked Bone Breaker, not because of the Bone Breaker itself, because first of all, this is pretty nicely arranged, and then we have a nice amount of dex, 49 points of dex we can take here, which will count for 45 for the bonus, which is for every 5 dex within range, 7.2% increased damage to vulnerable targets. I've swatted exploit here, and exploit is amazing. As I said, on bosses, vulnerable is much easier to keep than crowd control. And when an enemy is damaged by you, they become vulnerable for 3 seconds. This cannot happen more than once every 20 seconds per enemy. Sure, okay, understandable. We have other ways to keep vulnerable on bosses, but this is good to have it as an additional bonus for mobbing. And we enter through here. This way, then we're what I would recommend doing here is it's a very interesting way. I don't want to take this intelligence point, so I'm not gonna go right for the socket. We're doing this overpower damage, overpower damage, and strength willpower, overpower damage, then willpower, and then dex and the socket. After this, what I would do is I would take this dex and dex, and then I would move over here. Take this damage reduction while healthy dex, damage reduction while healthy strength and dex. Then eventually I would take this one, that one, this one, that one, and this one and this one to get this one and that one, and then moving on. And the next step would be again going here, here, here. And since we want willpower, we are entering through that side instead of that side. Willpower here for Imbiber. Imbiber, I'm not taking it for the increased potion healing. I'm taking it because it gives us damage while we are healthy. And it's 8.822. And there's a lot of willpower in the decimator board, and decimator is pretty close to the sockets, which is why I've actually invested into taking it. If you look at the others, we don't have many more boards that are that way. So you do this. After you take that one, you probably would want to move here. Willpower, damage reduction from vulnerable, damage reduction from vulnerable strength, and 2 willpower around there. Eventually, later we can return to take some of this damage reduction to vulnerable. So once you've done that, you can go down and take strength, vulnerable damage, strength, vulnerable damage, and then more vulnerable damage, and then this willpower. And after that, you would want to take willpower, strength, willpower, and move on. Take decimator. And at this point, you would be level 89 with 0 renown, or if you have all the renown points, which is 20, then you would be level 84. And then you start filling by first adding this board, which, as you can see, is the weapons master. Again, not bad thing to have, but look at how far it is to get. It's not worth the points I would invest to reach it. So you're starting this side. Willpower, strength, willpower, and dex. And dex, not as needed. Strength is what we're going for this board. We're putting seeding. Again, there is another thing that's similar to seeding that specifies pow arms. You might want to do that, but I would recommend going for a sword setup. Um, because of the while wielding a sword, you gain 3 fury when you kill an enemy, which is pretty solid. This on Whirlwind is such a good combo. Now you take this strength, then you go up physical damage, dex, physical damage, strength. We want to take this dex instead of this willpower. So then you take this strength and then you pick this. After you've picked this one, you can maybe take that physical damage and that strength. Actually, first this obviously, and then that. Then you take this strength, that strength. Then move on to this side. Strength here, armor, willpower, strength, and then strength. Then instead of taking this, you're going this way. Willpower, strength, and dex. Now there is some strength here you can take. If you feel the need later, you can put those 2 points, but are those 2 points worth the 7.2 damage increase damage while wielding a sword or not? What I would do is I would go this way, strength, willpower, strength, and then take physical damage, attack speed as a cluster. And then we are filling. We are returning back to the beginning to fill up. We are not taking all 70 strength that we can take. We're taking the ones that are close to what we already took, which is this one and those two here. And with that one, we are not taking 3 points to get 10 strength or 2 points to get 2 strength. And it is fine. It is fine doing it that way. Next, you would see other places I filled up. I filled up the points here around the fears, and I took this danger reduction from close enemies, and then this danger reduction from close enemies, and then over here I filled up with some other physical damage things. Over here I've made it look like that. So you can kind of see the big picture and see the difference between this one and between that one. Hopefully it's a little clearer to see some of the differences over here and down there and so on. To get notified when I upload more content like this one or other builds and guides for Wooter and not so Wooter games, you can subscribe to my channel and hit that bell button to not miss out on notifications. As well as keep in mind there's something called memberships on YouTube, which lets you be a paying member for my channel to get access to perks such as emotes and badges made by me, as well as the option to get one-on-one tutoring for the very basics of Adobe Photoshop, Premiere and After Effects. And memberships can be cancelled at any time if you no longer want to be a member. Thanks for watching all the way until the end, Struck Web. Keep it cool until next time, and goodbye.